Good afternoon, everyone. With the U.S. croplands still looking much like this, prices are already rising to absurd levels in commodities. Take a look at the past to forecast the future. Corn planted acres, 58 million, possibly down to 54. When we look at the corn production versus consumption, there just won't be enough this year. Still digging into the Chinese corn belt, they're having delays as well. This is in no way financial advice, my personal opinion only, but I see the markets moving like my favorite Coldplay song, Up and Up. And during these uncertain times, I've teamed up with My Patriot Supply long-term food storage, a nice affordable starter kit, 2-week food supply, 1,500 calories per day, breakfast, lunch, and dinners, plus the 4-gallon storage containers included in that. This is a good first step in getting more self-sufficient. And if you click through the Prepare with ADAPT 2030 page in My Patriot Supply, you can get this starter kit for $75. Please remember there's a limit of 2 per household in this special offer. The main reason I am bringing you this video and have spent so much time and research doing this is because I don't know if you're going to be able to afford your food moving forward. Let's take a look at what's going to happen in the very near future, but if this continues into next year, you're going to be paying triple for your food. This is what the American heartland currently looks like. Crop grow zones, largest producer in the world, 40% of all production, corn-wise. Fields are in atrocious condition. And before they've even done these field tours, in terms of planting and looking at the emergence of corn, prices are already skyrocketing on the futures market. And you have to realize in the commodities market, a 2% move in a day is like a traditional stock on the NASDAQ or something going up 50%. These kind of moves are unprecedented except for 1993 and 2011. Those had massive floods in the corn belt, grow belts of America, but it was nothing, I mean nothing like this current event is. And prices have been bobbing up and down, right around 340 to 440. Now taking a look at AgWeb, the corn planting map. This takes us out through May 26, but we're going to jump into June just after this. Now take a look at the box that I encapsulated everything. If you go to the very bottom here, you see all the states that are planting corn, 58%. This is far behind the 90% averages at this time of the year. But that was back May 26, just a week and a half or so ago. But when we jump up to June 3rd, they're still barely at 67%. And you can see how far 2019 sticks above everything else. I mean, far past the standard deviation of what you would expect for floods like this. Now, this chart might be a little deceiving, so let's put the real numbers to it. So if you're going to get out a calculator and do everything as I did, you can follow with me. So on June 2nd, they still had 82 million acres of corn and soy to plant. Now this dwarfs the 54 million in 1995. That's 30 million more this year that are unplanted versus when there were skyrocketing prices back in the 90s. Now the conservative estimate, and I'm going to use that word again, conservative estimate of non-planting is 31 million. I have it already from several people that live in the heartland writing me going, it's 35 and above, definitely. So I'm starting to put these charts together off of the corn planted areas. I had it in the right side of the chart here, 31 to 35 million acres not going to be planted. They won't know exactly until we sweep through all the non-plant dates and the crop insurance is divvied out to the farmers and who decides not to plant, who does, and then at the end, somewhere around the end of August, prices are going to move somewhere along in there. My personal opinion, again, not financial advice, but we look how low this is. This is lower than anything ever since 1938. Even beating the massive floods in 1968 and the massive floods in the 1990s. And when we come out here and we look at the corn acreage unplanted as of May 19th, these numbers haven't changed that much. That's the insane thing. So when we look at Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, these are major percentage of the U.S. corn, 35% plus. Here's a breakdown on the ranking states. But when we still have Iowa, Illinois, Nebraska, and Indiana under extreme duress from non-planting, That's a huge percentage of the U.S. corn crop. This is the most important thing you need to recognize in moving forward with yields. If it's planted, doesn't mean it's going to come up and we're going to get full yields at 170 bushels per acre or 160 or whatever it might be. They're talking about scrappy, poor conditions of emerging corn. When they're using sloppy in a business report about ag, you know it is bad because the mainstream corporate media does not come out fully and say anything that off the hook unless it's way more off the hook and they're coming back conservative. So sloppy and poor coming out of USDA reports, oh, that's a big one. You should read between the lines. That acreage coming out for yields is going to be so poor. So when they say acreage planted, you're going to get nowhere near the yield coming out of there. And realize, before these reports were coming out, it was still sitting around 420, 430, and they're saying if we lose 10 million acres, it's going to go up to 6. Well, we're going to lose 30 million acres. So how high is it really going to go? And those of you who have played Monopoly in your lifetime, remember this card, get out of jail free? This one spooks me. You know why? Because they're putting advice out for farmers how to get out of those futures contracts that they cannot fill or may not fill. Now, in English, that means the farmer were pledging their yields into the futures market as a sell. If they're not able to fill it or give that corn into the market, they're going to have some tremendous problems. So here we are, major agricultural publications, journals telling farmers if they can't grow the corn and you're obligated contractually, how are you going to get out of that? So they gave them 3 options here: lifting out, roll the contract forward. This is the one that woke me up the most here. Number 3, option strategies. Now they're telling the farmers to go in and go long on corn, get some corn calls to offset the losses they might take. So if they're telling the farmers to get in and bet on the markets going call forward, skyrocketing prices to offset their losses, we've entered twilight zone. That is insane. They're telling the farmers to bet long on the corn to offset. This next one comes from the amazing site Farm Doc Daily. I've linked this one below. You need to read this article that they put out. So looking at the prevented planting acreage for corn, now this is the deviation. Now the massive floods that I talked about, 2011, when we take a look at the delta here, 2011 was only pushing what, 13%? We are now at 32%. We're so far above anything that's ever been recorded in the late planting deviations that it's really almost off the chart where they're going to need to put another bar if we don't get this thing in. Now what does that mean for you and I though? Let's talk about late planting. This comes back to University of Illinois with the Farm Doc Daily again. Todd Hubbs putting together amazing information. You need to follow this gentleman. If you want to see what corn's doing, these field trials that they did are reducing 1.1 bushel for each day past May 30th planting. Now the states vary in latitude, so obviously some places are cooler, they're going to plant later, some places are warmer. Kansas obviously going to be way warmer than northern Illinois, but when you come down to it, everywhere is past this date already. So as we're marching forward, and they're trying to forecast out that they're going to be getting 170 bushels per acre, and we're marching forward. What is it already? The 5th of May? So here we're already going to knock 6.6 bushels off, and they're still trying to plant. So that rosy forecast of 170 is probably going to get knocked down to 150, probably going to go way lower into the 120s, just based on the flooding we're seeing and like they called scrappy emergence, soggy planting conditions. And over onto the U.S. corn acres harvested. Now remember the planting versus the harvesting, there's a little bit lower number due to, again, inclement weather and some areas get wiped out and it's not 100% what they plant, they harvest. It's about 7 million acres on average less. So I'm using the same numbers that the USDA is putting out. And you saw the previous forecasts of what was going to be planted at 58 million. So I'm going to drop that right down to 51 million, or if it does drop to 54 million, we'll go down to 47 million. Acres harvested. This is the lowest. This even goes below the 1968 harvest. 1988 harvest, we saw food inflation skyrocket in the 80s too. So you can expect another run up in these prices. My personal opinion, not investment advice, looking at a history book. Now we're coming into your food prices, and this is why your food prices are going to rise for sure. The corn usage by segment, exports, bottom left. We're going below what we grow to what we consume in the U.S. There will be very few exports, plus those massive floods that wiped away an enormous amount of stored grains this year. Just put a big X through those exports. So that means the rest of the world is going to be looking for different countries to get corn from. I'm going to cover China in a second here. And by the way, I'm going to be putting out a full report that's going to include China, South America, with Brazil and Argentina, and also the Ukraine and some different areas in Europe. That report, I think I'll put that out on the weekend. I'll include a buy-through link for that, as well as an update to what we're seeing. I believe it should be for everyone, whether you're an investor or whether you're just looking to see how the future is going to go, so you can get to that supermarket and get the right things to get ready for this grand solar minimum. The amount of time and research I put into this alone, you would pay for that. But I'm going to ante up and get into all the different regions of the world that are supplying corn to give us a full overview of how much these prices are going to rise. Not investment advice, it's just an overview to see how you can protect yourself and your families from runaway skyrocketing food inflation. I'm going to try to put that out here on the weekend and get that in a PDF. Now, the feed and residual. This is where we get into meats. Full 33% of all the corn in the United States is used for feed and things that you and I might eat. So when we're looking at the total usage at 15 billion bushels, whoop, we just got knocked back 5 to 6 billion bushels. We're not going to have even enough to supply our own United States. Can you imagine this? The United States becomes a corn importer because we lost an enormous amount of our stored grains and we can't grow enough this year. Where does that leave the rest of the world that used to rely on us to supply them? And of course, when we get into ethanol, or is the U.S. government going to have to take proactive action and start slashing ethanol mandates to get that back into the feed? Because you're seeing what's happening in the cattle futures and the cattle markets right now. They are selling an enormous amount ahead into slaughter because they see these prices rising where they're not going to be able to feed these cattle because the prices are going to be too high on their break-even point. And I encourage you to head to Feeder Flash with Corbett Wall. They cover all the cattle auctions. And they're talking about a tidal wave of cattle going in due to skyrocketing prices for feed that they won't be able to take the price rises either. So now we got everything you're eating. Now take a look at the right side here. Anything that's involved in a manufacturing process for the food you eat. And this is pretty much in everything that is in a supermarket that comes from a supermarket that's not fresh food. If it's been to a factory, it includes this. High fructose corn syrup, starch, cereals, beverages, alcohol, sweeteners, and then we got the seed market way down at the bottom there. So wait a second, you mean that seed's going to cost more money for the farmers to plant next year? All right, they're already adding price in. So you can see where this takes us, with the United States being so crushed this year. Now come the charts that I hope you stay awake tonight thinking about this, that you don't get sleep because you see the dire situation we are going into. World corn production on the left and world corn consumption on the right. Now the corn production, we're going into a negative this year. And when I say that, we're looking around 10 billion bushels, and I have some numbers coming up in just a second. So subtract that US 1440 down to 10.8 or somewhere around that. That brings the world total production down 5 billion, right around 38 billion bushels. Now China, this is the wild card here. I have a couple researchers helping me right now dig into the Chinese planting, and it looks as horrendous as the United States. China is facing something very similar to the United States at the moment. Their yields are going to be substantially reduced. This is the wild card. These two producers right here, pushing up about 60% of global production, and both are not going to meet their own internal consumption demand this year. So when we get over to the right side with the consumption, you got the US at 12, we're going down to 10, and China's dropping down to about 9. So where's that going to leave the rest of the world? They're talking about Brazil, record production, but they're only going to be a couple 100,000 tons over last year. So the record production looks good in the news, but they're only going to add 100,000 tons. Places are getting too expensive. Other places are trying to drop price to grab all the people out there searching for corn. So I want to bring you here to the commodities charts. Flood versus delay time versus peak price. This is what you need to get. Drive it home. Understand it. We had the big floods and there was a delay time until peak at more than doubling. What do you think is going to happen this time? This is the worst flooding ever and the lowest planting and the lowest yields forecast ever in the history of the United States. And China's dragging along right there with it, delayed planting as well. My conservative call, and again, this is not investment advice, I'm just trying to give you a picture for the future of what's happened in the past versus now. $7.35 by December. So think about that. You know, these contracts in the market are 5,000 bushels of corn. And if you're buying in at $4.30 and it goes to $7.35, that's $15,000 per contract. Those things are going for about $1,200 right now. Again, not investment advice, it's just what I'm following on the markets. And how did I even arrive at any of these numbers? Well, I'm doing the actual math to do it based on conservative figures from the USDA prior years versus what you see now, and being incredibly conservative in what I am forecasting out for prices. So I'll leave you this chart right here. It goes through the planted acreage, the harvest acreage. The yields are going to be tremendously low. So 160, I left that as a benchmark so you don't go, oh no, you're just trying to skew the figures, man. I really think that's coming in around 120, but we'll leave it at 160 for now. And then we have the ethanol usage and all the exports not going to be there. So what's going to happen? They're going to be down 750 million bushels on exports. Like, where are people going to really get that from? Because China's going down too. So anywhere you see those red on there, ending stocks, we're going to be down 1.3 billion bushels on the ending stocks. Do you think that's not going to affect price? Now take a look here at Chinese corn belt right through these same areas. Delayed planting, low yields expected. Unbelievable. As this world spins, the only producers are the small producers that are having any luck this year. And again, as we head into this southern hemisphere, there's already reports that the late season corn down in Brazil getting frozen right now. So we don't know what's going to happen with Brazil. But taking a look at the animal disease impacts reports coming out of China already, the report highlights are just like this. Persistent dry weather with this razor-thin line of floods on the other side, drought on one side. Heilongjiang, I talked about this, these same regions going offline in China. And here they are, going offline in China. The uncertainty about prices and harvests are likely to delay planting of the corn crop again for the second consecutive year in Northeast China and Northern China plains. And then when you start matching up provinces that are the major corn producers, China is losing its Illinois and Indiana and Iowa also. Thanks for watching. Hope you got something out of the video. As I said, I'll be putting out this full report on the weekend. I'll set up a payment platform as well as a buy-through link for that. But you need to understand the state of corn right now on our planet. We are going into the highest prices, in my personal opinion, that have ever been seen. As you can see, the state of our food production globally is what we expect, and the intensification of this grand solar minimum. You're on your own. No governments are going to be warning you about all this dire situation of never-ending escalating food prices and how it will affect your lives, how they're going to put police on the street to control this mass chaos that's about to ensue as people's food prices double and triple. I hope it really gives you some insight into being able to get out there into the stores and buy some things right now, because this is not going to end this year. This is the first year of the food losses. Many anticipate this rolling and getting more intense with the food losses every single year, with global famine by 2028. This is it. This is the first year in earnest. And you can see how bad it is. Next year, nobody knows what's going to happen. Anticipated to be equivalent or as bad or worse next year. Yields, do you think they can really refurbish all these fields by next year to get them up and running to get prime yields again? I personally don't think so. Again, I wish you the best of luck in your preparations. You can find more information about this on minds.com/adapt2030. We're putting this in print form as well up on Steemit, Adapt 2030.